Welcome to Rising, friends. Saagar, what's the word this morning?
Oh, we've got a lot today. There's a new Reuters poll showing Biden and Bernie very close, statistically tied. That's a very big deal. We've got YouTuber Michael Brooks. China has been officially labeled a currency manipulator, and we're going to dive into that. All that today on Rising.
All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
I've got a little bit more of a cerebral take for you guys today. For those of you who frequently watch this show, you may be able to tell my politics are a little bit different. I'm not socially liberal and fiscally conservative. I don't particularly care about the national debt, and I don't think that GDP is the perfect measure of a healthy society. My politics have their genesis in the spring of 2015, when those of us who were watching the GOP primary, they wanted to see a new party. A party that wasn't obsessed with cutting upper income tax cuts and instead providing tax relief to support working families, a party which recognized that building a Chinese middle class at the expense of our own in the name of free trade was a moral and a national disaster, a party that recognized we should be just as skeptical of powerful technology companies as we are of government. These concerns were validated in 2016 with the election of President Donald Trump, but they were not answered on a policy level. This Republican Party is different than the one that came before it. It's a product of a political realignment. The fight around how to navigate this realignment is perhaps more vicious than the fight for the control of the GOP in 2016. That's why I've spent a lot of time thinking about how this political realignment happened. So much so that I'm excited to announce here that I'm actually launching a policy-minded podcast at the Hudson Institute. It's a nonprofit think tank here in DC where I am a newly appointed media fellow. Podcast appropriately is called The Realignment, and in the first episode available today, I'm joined along by my co-host Marshall Kosloff by Hillbilly Elegy author J.D. Vance. He's a deep thinker on realignment issues, like how conservatives should approach government. He says we should be dealing with China the same way that we should have considered Nazi Germany in the 1930s, something you might have heard me say on this show, and how we should grapple with the growing role of technology in our lives. He's followed by conservative author George Will, where we have an expanded version of the debate that we had on this show about the role of government itself and what it means for the GOP. I'll be speaking to a lot of thinkers, politicians, other guests similar to those you might see here. And if you're interested, I hope you'll check it out. It's called The Realignment from the Hudson Institute, where I'm grateful to be a media fellow. And I'm even more grateful to be host of an incredible show like this one, where Crystal and I get to talk about the things that nobody else will. And I love everybody here at The Hill TV, and especially my co-host, Crystal.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm excited to dig into the podcast. Do you think, part of what has animated the Republican Party under sort of the Paul Ryan wing and during the Tea Party era was this abiding belief that people were deeply committed to reducing federal deficits?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of exactly what I've been, that's what I've been getting into and what I bring here for every interview, which is that something dramatically shifted in 2016. All of the GOP finally realized that all of the people who vote for it do not align with the party elite. And so that breakdown has made it so that there's basically a 30-year policy deficit of smart people looking at these issues in a way that actually aligns with the people who voted for them.
But I don't think it's exclusively a right phenomenon. I think post the financial collapse, when we lost more middle-class jobs and gained low-wage jobs out of the recession, there was this realization that the bipartisan sort of neoliberal consensus has basically failed. This pro-corporate, let's put profit maximization over absolutely everything else, has really failed at giving people sort of meaning and basic dignity in their lives. So you have this situation where the stock market might be doing great, GDP growth might be doing great, and yet on the other hand, you've got addiction crisis, suicide crisis, you've got the rise of hateful ideologies that are fed by that anxiety. That's not to excuse anyone who holds those hateful ideologies, but it's fed also by that total lack of meaning and resources in most communities throughout the country. And so part of what is scary but also exciting about this moment in our politics is everybody's sort of thrown the rules out and said, we've got to imagine something different because that thing we were doing has been a disaster.
You're exactly right. The genesis of this was all there in 2005. You know, the housing market, everything was revving. Yep. Well, a lot of jobs were starting to get shipped over to China. And then with 2008, it was a true kick in the teeth to the middle class. And policymakers really just embraced even more the failed consensus. Barack Obama, the person elevated to office by that economic recession, wanted to sign a TPP deal with China. That is the perfect encapsulation of what we're talking about here,
That-
which is rule by
Yep.
by this failed consensus. But the real question is what do we do about it?
Right.
And that is something that, I mean, I talk about here all the time. I'm excited to have a longer form, non-media environment to talk about it too, because what it really takes is a long, thoughtful conversation. It took years to transform the Goldwater revolution into the Reagan policy agenda. 20 years, almost, in fact, in order to come up with some of these things. So we're really just in the infancy of this beginning.
Yeah, and I think you put your finger also on the project of this show, which is to sort of fearlessly explore the bounds of where we might going and what a different kind of politics might look like. So I'm excited about the podcast.
Thank you.
Excited to be
Appreciate
here with
it.
you every day. Next up on Rising, we chart the rise of online radicalization.
Sites like YouTube and Twitter crack down even more on the spread of hate. That when Rising continues.